10 things NASA doesn't want us to know. Hi everyone and welcome to this YouTube channel. NASA is quite possibly of the main association in the United States. Yet there are bunches of mysteries that they don't need getting out. A solitary tweet or proclamation from NASA can undoubtedly turn how we might interpret the world over, so it's a good idea that they're mindful. In any case, NASA has done a few pretty obscure things in the past that they would prefer we neglect. Legitimate things as well, for example, working with the Soviet Union when they were the US's greatest adversary during the Cold War, working with the foe, and that's only the tip of the icebergs. The saying of NASA is to help all, yet this doesn't appear to be altogether obvious. On the off chance that it doesn't help NASA or, more regrettable, harms them, then, at that point, we should forget about it, taking everything into account. There is such a huge amount about space, our nearby planet group, the world that we actually don't have any idea. Space is huge, with billions of universes and stars, and planets in our own planetary group, yet to be completely investigated or perceived. Researchers' information on space is continuously developing. There are, be that as it may, a few truly cool things we realize about space at this moment. We've gathered a rundown of our thought process, our 10 heavenly realities that we trust you'll believe are mind-boggling. 10. Astronauts don't have life insurance. This is really dreary, and it most likely has to do with the high-risk circumstances that space travelers are consistently in. Yet, until 2003, space travelers that were being shipped off to faraway missions didn't have life coverage from NASA. Preceding Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong's group really marked signatures to their family members so that assuming something happened to him, they'd have something of significant worth to sell. 9. They recruited enemy scientists, Operation Paperclip. One dull mystery that NASA would like to be kept in obscurity occurred during World War II. The United States enrolled in excess of 1,600 Nazi researchers in organizations like NASA to expand their finance. The code name the U.S. used to acquire the researchers was known as Operation Paperclip, which was an activity where the Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency, JIOA, got Werner von Braun and his V-2 rocket group, and that's only the tip of the iceberg. 8. The repercussions of suffering a fit of madness in space. NASA is typically ready for whatever might turn out badly, particularly in space. For space travelers who can't deal with the tension or powerful nature of room travel, NASA has formal methods which are really savage. In the event that a space explorer experiences an attack of frenzy, colleagues should immobilize his arms and feet with tape. Then, at that point, infuse him with a sedative to ensure no mischief comes to any other person ready. 7. Astronauts drink their urine. This isn't simply a metropolitan legend. Despite the fact that it appears to be extremely unhygienic, that truly isn't what's happening here. NASA has fostered a course of reusing pee and changing over it into drinkable water at space stations. The Russians were known to decline to hydrate. However, the Americans had no issue drinking the reused pee of their previous enemies during the Cold War. 6. The mysteries of Apollo 11. On July 20, 1969, the USA impacted the world forever via handling the principal space explorers on the Moon, accordingly coming out on top in the space race with the Soviets. Obviously, there have been a lot of paranoid notions that it was undeniably organized. It doesn't help that the video that showed Apollo 11 arriving on the Moon vanished suddenly. What's more, with everything that being expressed, the Soviets were really the initial ones to send a satellite to the Moon. 5. Damaging precious moonstones. This could sound harmless, yet it's hardcore. Thad Roberts was a researcher that NASA needs neglected, in light of the fact that he's presently burning through 8 years in jail for taking 600 pounds of lunar rocks from the Space Organization, and afterward continuing to engage in sexual relations on top of the valuable examples with his sweetheart. The natural liquids destroyed the examples, which were esteemed at $21 million. 4. Cooperating with the Soviet Union. Despite the fact that the space race was immense information during the Cold War, the United States and Soviet Union really collaborated on certain things. There was unmistakable aggression and question between the two countries somewhere in the range of 1957 and 1991. Yet, the Apollo-Soyuz test project, directed in 1975, was the principal joint U.S.-Soviet spaceflight, as an image of detente, the facilitating of stressed relations that the countries were chasing after at that point. 3. Warp drive. NASA has furtively been dealing with twist drive innovation for a really long time. It's not simply something you find in Star Trek and Star Wars and so forth. The sci-fi thought could become conceivable soon. In 2015, it became known on a discussion that NASA had tracked down an approach to advancing rapidly past the speed of light. This was the point at which the EM drive group shot lasers through a reverberation chamber that went more than 300 million meters per second. The group chipping away at it doesn't have any idea how it worked out. 2. Life on Mars. This appears to be exceptionally speculative, yet in 2014, a lady said that she had dealt with the Viking Mars rover project in 1979, and keeping in mind that dealing with the telemetry, 2 humanoid figures wearing ragged defensive spacesuits moved toward her. Subsequent to going to tell somebody, she returned and the room was locked, and it was concealed? NASA never remarked about the finding, so thinking about this one while considering other factors is ideal. The space program has brought about gigantic accomplishments for mankind. However, it never gets credit for giving Forrest Gump the instruments he expected to stumble into the United States. In the wake of designing an elastic trim cycle for space traveler protective caps, NASA engineers understood that a similar standard could be applied to shoes. The NASA strategy considered the production of safeguards in the lower part of the shoe, which proceeded to be a typical component in athletic tennis shoes. So next time your irritating companion demands that those strange foot gloves are the unrivaled running innovation, simply advise him that you will utilize space-age innovation. Then quit being companions with him. 1. The X-37B Secret Space Shuttle. This doesn't include NASA explicitly, however it's still right up their alley. The Air Force has had a mystery space transport in circle for quite a long time. However, nobody has a thought what it is really going after the thing it's been doing. The X-37B has done missions starting around 2010, after it was created in 998, and gave to DARPA. It was said it was utilized for surveillance. However, who truly knows? Space Force, maybe. Freethinker innovator and ex-Microsoft executive Nathan Myhrvold has been battling with NASA for the most recent few years about the investigation of close Earth space rock sizes. His 33-page logical paper scrutinizes the techniques used to assess the size of 164,000 space rocks. This could be hazardous on the grounds that a significant space rock will vigorously influence life on Earth, eventually, very much like it has previously, and information is basic to surveying the gamble. According to, for example, assuming there is an error by a component of 2 in width, that is a mix-up of a variable of 8 in energy. So these were all about 10 things NASA doesn't want us to know. Like and subscribe to the channel, give a comment in case of any questions and confusions, and also must click on the bell icon.